What if I told you that some of the most accurate prophecies ever written are still unfinished, waiting for their final moment to begin? What if the book of Daniel was never meant to remain in ancient history, but was written for a generation standing at the edge of global change? These visions were recorded more than 2,500 years ago, long before modern nations or global systems existed. Yet they predicted the rise and fall of empires with exact precision. Kingdoms came and went exactly as Daniel saw, and according to those same visions, the final events are still ahead of us. In this video, we will uncover 4 prophecies that point directly to what comes next, and why their order matters now more than ever. Like, comment, and subscribe, because once these prophecies begin to unfold, nothing will look the same again. Before we can understand why Daniel's final prophecies demand attention, we have to remember who Daniel was and why his visions carry weight. Daniel was still a teenager when Jerusalem fell around 605 BC, when the Babylonian Empire shattered his homeland, plundered the temple, and carried the best of Israel into captivity. He did not choose exile, and he did not choose to serve foreign kings. Yet even in a land that did not honor his God, Daniel was given something no empire could control. God granted him the ability to interpret dreams and receive visions, revelations that exposed not only what rulers saw in the night, but what history itself was about to become. That gift repeatedly placed Daniel in the center of world power. When kings who governed the known world were desperate for answers, Daniel was the one they summoned. And what makes his visions different is not their drama, but their precision. Daniel described the rise and fall of empires long before those empires reached the world stage. Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. One by one, history unfolded in the same sequence his visions revealed. These were not vague predictions that could be reshaped later. They were ordered, specific, and confirmed by the march of time. That is why when Daniel speaks about what is still ahead, the message cannot be treated lightly, because the earlier sections already proved true. With that foundation established, Daniel chapter 2 becomes more than an ancient story. It becomes a map of how human power ends. In this chapter, King Nebuchadnezzar receives a dream of a towering statue layered in metals, representing successive world kingdoms. Daniel is brought in to interpret it, and the interpretation is not simply political. It is prophetic. The vision shows that empires do not last, no matter how untouchable they appear in their moment. But the prophecy's focus is not the statue. The focus is what destroys it. Daniel tells the king that a stone appears not cut by human hands. That detail is decisive. This kingdom is not built by human strategy, elections, or military conquest. It is not an alliance, a reform movement, or a gradual evolution of society. It comes from outside the entire system. And when it arrives, it does not negotiate with the statue. It strikes. The stone hits the statue at its feet, and the entire structure collapses. Gold, silver, bronze, iron, everything shatters together, reduced to dust, carried away like chaff by the wind. The empires that shaped history vanish without leaving a trace. This is the point Daniel is making. Human kingdoms do not merge into God's kingdom. They are replaced by it. Then Daniel reveals what the stone becomes. It does not break apart and disappear. It grows, it expands, it becomes a mountain that fills the whole earth. Daniel 2:44 states the meaning plainly. The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, a kingdom that will not be handed to another people, a kingdom that will break in pieces every other kingdom and stand forever. Unlike every empire before it, This kingdom does not decay, does not fracture, and does not fall. This prophecy changes how we read everything else in Daniel. The rise of deception, the final world ruler, and the last 7 years are not the climax of history. They are the final stage before history is cut off. Daniel is not guiding us toward a human solution to global chaos. He is warning that every human system, no matter how advanced, stable, or powerful, has an expiration date set by God Himself. If Daniel's earlier visions correctly trace the path of empires, then this final outcome is not theory. It is the end point. And that means the most important question is no longer which kingdom rises next, but what happens just before the stone strikes, and whether the world will recognize the moment when God's kingdom begins. After revealing how kingdoms rise and how they end, Daniel is shown something even more unsettling. Because the final vision is no longer about empires, rulers, or global systems, but about people. Daniel chapter 12 shifts the focus from the fate of nations to the fate of every human life when history itself reaches its limit. This is where prophecy stops speaking in symbols of metal and beasts and begins speaking directly about eternity. Daniel is told that a time of distress is coming, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. This is not a regional crisis or a temporary collapse of order. It is the final pressure point of history, the moment when human rebellion, deception, and suffering reach their peak. The language is absolute, and the scope is global. Nothing like it has happened before, and nothing like it will ever happen again. But this unprecedented time of trouble is not the end. It is the doorway. At the center of Daniel 12 is a declaration that changes everything. Daniel is told that many who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake. This is not poetic imagery, and it is not symbolic renewal. The text presents it as a literal event. Death does not hold. The grave does not keep its claim. The dead rise. Every generation, every nation, every forgotten life, and every powerful ruler is brought back into view. History does not simply fade out. It is confronted. What makes this moment so sobering is what follows. Daniel makes it clear that resurrection does not lead to a single outcome. Some awaken to everlasting life. Others awaken to shame and everlasting contempt. Two destinies emerge, and there is no third option. There is no neutral ground, no delay, and no appeal once this moment arrives. When the resurrection happens, division is complete and final. This is why this prophecy matters now, not later. Daniel is not presenting resurrection as a distant theological concept. He is showing it as the unavoidable conclusion of history. Kings and servants rise together. The powerful and the ignored stand side by side. Status, influence, and legacy dissolve instantly. Every life is exposed to eternity without disguise. The placement of this vision is intentional. Daniel has already shown that human kingdoms fall and that God's kingdom replaces them. Now he shows that when that transition happens, humanity itself is judged. The end of political power is also the moment of moral accounting. The collapse of empires is not the climax. The awakening of the dead is. This prophecy also explains why the earlier visions carry urgency. The final 7 years, the deception, and the false peace are not simply global events to be observed. They are the final environment in which decisions are made. Daniel shows that resurrection does not ask what people knew, but where they stood. Information does not determine the outcome. Alignment does. By ending his revelations this way, Daniel removes every illusion of escape. History does not end in silence. It ends in awakening. And once that awakening comes, no one remains hidden, no one remains asleep, and no life remains unresolved. The only question left is not whether resurrection will happen, but which side of it each person will wake up on. If the visions Daniel received were only symbolic, they could be debated or reinterpreted. But Daniel chapter 9 removes that uncertainty completely, because prophecy stops speaking in images and begins speaking in numbers, dates, and deadlines. This is not a vision meant to stir imagination. It is a countdown. And once it begins, history moves according to it. Daniel receives this prophecy not while seeking revelation, but while praying. Reading the writings of Jeremiah, he realizes that Israel's time of judgment is nearing completion. He turns to God in confession, asking what comes next for his people. What he receives is far more than reassurance. The angel Gabriel appears and delivers a structured timeline that stretches from Daniel's day to the end of the age. Gabriel tells Daniel that 70 weeks are determined for his people and the holy city. These are not ordinary weeks. In prophetic language, a day represents a year, making each week equal to 7 years. The full period spans 490 years, covering the restoration of Jerusalem, the arrival of the Messiah, and events that extend to the conclusion of history itself. The 70 weeks are divided into 3 sections. The first is 7 weeks, or 49 years, assigned to the rebuilding of Jerusalem after exile. Daniel is told this restoration would occur in difficult times, surrounded by opposition, yet history confirms it unfolded exactly as described. The second section is 62 weeks, or 434 years, leading directly to the appearance of the Messiah. Together, these 2 sections total 69 weeks, or 483 years. Gabriel also provides a clear starting point: the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, issued in 457 BC under Persian authority. From that moment, the prophetic clock begins to move. When the 483 years are counted forward, they arrive at 27 AD, the exact year Jesus of Nazareth began his public ministry and was revealed as the Messiah. Given more than 5 centuries in advance, the prophecy lands precisely on time. But then the timeline does something unexpected. After the Messiah appears, Daniel is told he will be cut off, and the Jerusalem and the sanctuary will be destroyed again. History records this under Roman rule. And then the countdown stops. The 70th week does not begin. This pause is deliberate. Between the 69th and 70th week, the prophetic clock is suspended. History continues, but the final 7 years remain unopened. If the first 69 weeks were fulfilled with exact precision, then the final week cannot be dismissed or redefined. It remains future. Daniel also reveals what restarts the clock. The final week begins with a specific action. A future ruler confirms a covenant for 1 week. When that happens, the last 7 years begin, and history accelerates toward its end. The prophecy does not question whether the end will come. It proves it has already been scheduled. After giving Daniel a precise timeline of history, God shows him what will emerge when that timeline reaches its final phase. In Daniel chapters 7 and 8, prophecy shifts from dates to power. Daniel is given a vision not of peaceful succession, but of violent instability, because the final world ruler does not rise in calm conditions. He rises out of chaos. Daniel sees the world's great powers, symbolized as beasts, coming up from a storm-tossed sea. The imagery is intentional. The sea represents turmoil, unrest, and disorder. These kingdoms are not born from harmony, but from crisis. Each beast represents a dominant empire, But Daniel's attention is drawn to the fourth one, because it is unlike anything before it. It is described as terrifying, extraordinarily powerful, and destructive beyond comparison. This fourth beast tramples everything in its path. From it emerge 10 horns, representing 10 rulers or centers of authority that arise from this final world system. Power is distributed, fragmented, and unstable. But as Daniel watches, something unexpected happens. A smaller horn begins to rise among them. As it grows, it uproots 3 of the original horns. This figure does not inherit authority peacefully. He takes it. Daniel is drawn to this ruler because of his defining traits. The horn has eyes like a man and a mouth that speaks boastfully. This is not a mindless tyrant. He is calculating, persuasive, and self-aware. Daniel 7 makes it clear that this ruler speaks against God, persecutes those who remain faithful, and seeks to change laws and appointed times. His authority goes beyond politics. It reaches into belief, worship, and identity. Daniel chapter 8 adds critical detail. This ruler does not succeed primarily through brute force. He succeeds through deception. Daniel says that he causes deceit to prosper and destroys many while they feel secure. This detail cannot be overlooked. People do not follow him at first because they are forced. They follow him because they are convinced. He rises during a moment when the world is desperate for stability, and he presents himself as the answer. This explains why his ascent is so dangerous. He does not appear as an open enemy of peace. He appears as its architect. Nations exhausted by conflict accept his leadership. Systems strained by instability welcome his solutions. Daniel shows that the world's desire for relief becomes the doorway through which deception enters. Scripture later identifies this figure more clearly. What Daniel calls the little horn, later Revelation recognizes as the Antichrist. He is not merely a political leader, but a counterfeit ruler, offering a false version of order while opposing God at every level. His authority is global in reach, ideological in control, and spiritual in its rebellion. Yet Daniel reveals something even more unsettling. This ruler's rise is not random. It is connected directly to the final, unfulfilled segment of the 70 weeks prophecy. Daniel 9:27 states that a future ruler will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. This act is not a side detail. It is the trigger. The moment this covenant is confirmed, the final 7 years begin. At first, the covenant appears to succeed. Stability returns. Conflict subsides. The world believes it has stepped back from the edge. But Daniel warns that this peace is temporary and calculated. The ruler's true nature does not appear immediately. It is revealed halfway through the 7-year period. This is the pattern Daniel establishes. The Antichrist does not rise openly hostile. He rises strategically. He does not demand worship at first. He earns trust. He does not rule by fear initially. He rules by agreement. And that is why his rise is more dangerous than open tyranny. By the time the deception becomes clear, the systems of control are already in place. Daniel's prophecy removes the illusion that humanity will recognize the threat early. The world does not resist this ruler at first. It embraces him. Only later does the mask fall, and when it does, the final stage of history begins to unfold rapidly. This prophecy is not meant to provoke speculation. It is meant to explain why the final crisis looks the way it does. The Antichrist does not emerge because humanity loves evil. He emerges because humanity longs for peace without truth. And according to Daniel, that longing sets the stage for the most dangerous deception the world has ever known. History does not collapse all at once. According to Daniel, It reaches a moment where everything appears stable, controlled, and resolved, and then it fractures. This is not the rise of the final ruler. This is the moment when his true purpose is revealed. Daniel 9:27 describes a single action that restarts the prophetic clock. A future ruler confirms a covenant with many for 1 week. This is not a vague promise or symbolic agreement. It is a deliberate act tied directly to the final, unfulfilled 7 years of the 70 weeks prophecy. The covenant is presented as a solution. It signals the end of conflict, the restoration of order, and the return of stability. For the first time in a long while, the world believes it can breathe again. The importance of this moment lies in its effect. Nations respond with relief. Political tension eases. Long-standing hostilities appear resolved. According to the prophetic structure Daniel provides, this covenant marks the beginning of the final 7-year period. The timeline that paused for centuries suddenly resumes. History accelerates. For the first half of this 7-year period, nothing appears catastrophic. On the surface, the covenant works. Sacrifice and religious practice continue. Economic systems stabilize. Authority becomes centralized, but not yet oppressive. Trust builds. The ruler behind the covenant is praised as a peacemaker, not questioned as a threat. This is why the deception is effective. It does not begin with persecution. It begins with cooperation. But Daniel is clear that this peace has an expiration date. In the middle of the week, everything changes. The ruler who confirmed the covenant breaks it. He brings an end to sacrifice and offering and desecrates the holy place. This act is not simply political, it is spiritual. Scripture calls it the abomination that causes desolation. It marks the moment when false peace gives way to open defiance. This midpoint betrayal exposes what the covenant was always meant to accomplish. Control replaces cooperation. Worship is redirected. Authority is no longer shared. It is enforced. What was once presented as unity becomes domination. Daniel's prophecy shows that the ruler does not lose power at this moment. He reveals it. Jesus himself warned about this event. In Matthew 24, he tells his followers that when the abomination of desolation appears, a period of great tribulation will follow, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. This is not symbolic suffering. It is global in scale and overwhelming in intensity. According to Jesus, nothing in human history compares to it. The shift at the midpoint explains why the final 7 years are so severe. The world is not plunged into chaos because order failed. It is plunged into chaos because deception succeeded. Systems are already in place. Allegiances have already been formed. By the time resistance becomes possible, the cost is extreme. Daniel's prophecy reveals that this period is defined by exposure. The true nature of the final ruler is no longer hidden. The covenant is broken. The lie is visible. But the consequences are irreversible. The second half of the 7 years is marked by persecution, control, and spiritual confrontation. This moment also clarifies the purpose of the final crisis. It is not random destruction. It is separation. Pressure forces alignment. People are no longer able to remain neutral. Worship, loyalty, and truth become unavoidable questions. The world is compelled to choose between submission to false authority or faithfulness to God. The abomination of desolation is not the end of the story. It is the turning point. Daniel shows that once this moment occurs, the remaining events move quickly toward conclusion. Evil reaches full expression, not to win, but to be judged. The final ruler's authority peaks, not to endure, but to collapse. This prophecy does not exist to satisfy curiosity. It exists to explain why the final phase of history unfolds the way it does. Peace first, betrayal second, judgment last. And once the covenant is broken, the countdown to the end can no longer be stopped. Daniel's prophecies are not designed to create fear or speculation. They are designed to create clarity. After revealing the structure of history, the long pause, and the final crisis, the remaining question is not about dates, but about posture. What does it look like to live in the space between fulfillment and completion? The pause in the prophetic timeline is not empty time. It is purposeful time. According to the logic of Daniel's visions, this interval exists so that humanity is not rushed blindly into the final reckoning. It is a season of restraint where warning comes before consequence and understanding comes before pressure. The fact that the final week has not yet begun means the door to choice remains open. Daniel's framework shows that the world does not stumble into the final crisis by accident. It is led there by patterns that repeat and intensify. Instability increases, not as an anomaly, but as a condition. People grow weary of conflict and uncertainty, not merely politically, but morally and spiritually. In that environment, the desire for relief becomes stronger than the desire for truth. This is where discernment becomes essential. Daniel does not instruct future generations to search for a name or fixate on a single event. He provides criteria. Power consolidated during chaos. Authority justified by peace. Control accepted because it arrives gradually. These are warning signals, not predictions to be sensationalized. The danger is not sudden tyranny, but comfortable surrender. The pause also exposes a deeper issue. When pressure is low, beliefs remain theoretical. When pressure increases, allegiance becomes visible. Daniel's visions imply that the final season will not test intelligence or awareness, but loyalty. The decisive factor is not how much one knows about prophecy, but where one places trust when certainty is replaced by cost. This is why watchfulness, in Daniel's sense, is not obsession. It is stability. It is the ability to remain anchored when systems shift and narratives change. Discernment means resisting the temptation to exchange conviction for convenience. It means understanding that peace without truth is not peace at all. The final season will not arrive with universal alarm. It will arrive with reassurance. Normality will be emphasized. Urgency will be dismissed. Daniel's warnings are meant to prevent complacency, not provoke panic. The pause exists so that when the final movement begins, those who are attentive will recognize the direction of history, even if the world celebrates it. This part of Daniel's message is quiet, but it is decisive. The final outcome has already been shown. The only variable left is readiness. When the pause ends, preparation cannot be rushed. And when history accelerates,